So hello and welcome to this side event which we are organizing as part of the FAO Science and Innovation Forum. And thank you for taking time to join us today. And my name is Rashid Suleiman. I work with as a director of the Center for Research on Innovation and Science Policy based in India. And today with me, I have Johan Blockhill from the FiBL, who with me and Johan will be moderating this event today. In this side event, we aim to achieve mainly three things. Firstly, we would like to provide an overview of all these new instruments and tools used for measuring the performance of EAS. And secondly, we wanted to share experiences, share the results and experiences of pilot testing these instruments in the different countries. So so we have two sessions. It's following this. The first in which the people who developed these instruments, who contributed to development of these instruments, will share about what is in this tool specifically. And secondly, we wanted to in the next, it's a panel discussion where the people who are part of pilot testing these instruments in different countries will share their experiences. And finally, we have three key speakers at the end whom we have requested them to talk about the value they see in these instruments and what challenges these new tools and instruments are helping them in addressing some of these challenges. During the event, we will have opportunities for interaction. We will request you to post your questions, comments, clarifications. So feel free to do that in the chat, and we will try to see how many of them could be dealt with during the session. This event is recorded, and so we will make this recording as well as the PPT is available to all the participants. We would request the participants to mute your mic, and maybe you can also maybe mute the video when the presentation is going on. I would also like to say that now, because as you might have noted, because this is an event which is organized by the three regional networks of the Global Forum for Rural Advisory Services, the GFRAS, and the FiBL, the Institute of Organic Agriculture at Switzerland, and FAO. We are also keen to showcase that the development of these tools and frameworks. This is I would say this is a success story. I would say we wanted to celebrate these partnerships where the regional networks of GFRAS and even the country for us, which are the national level extension advisory service units, they have combined their efforts in developing and pilot testing these new tools and events. And I believe all of you might be knowing about the GFRAS, the Global Forum for Rural Advisory Services, which is the global platform for extension advisory services, which is taking a lead role in policy advocacy as well as capacity development of extension advisory services globally. And the regional networks like the Asia Pacific Island Rural Advisory Services, the AFAAS, the African Forum for Rural Advisory Services, and our Latin American counterpart RELASER, they are all part of this GFRAS family. We have a lot to cover today, so I do not want to take much more time, and I would like to request Delgarma Chullenbatter, the Agriculture Research Officer at FAO, who coordinated this whole activity, to provide a brief background on this whole development of this tool and the rationale for development of this tool. Over to you, Degi, and I would once again welcome all the participants. To you, Degi. Thank you.
Good morning, good afternoon, dear colleagues, friends, and fellow participants. You see my screen, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. So it was a really great pleasure for me to be part of this journey of developing these three complementary instruments with objective to create better evidence in extension advisory services. I just want to, in my presentation, talk to you a bit about why we started doing it and how did we do it, basically, a bit of background and rationale, no? And now, if I can move my slide. Do you see my next slide or no? Yeah. So first of all, there were all the new things happening. We had some old problems, you know, transition from public-driven extension services that was very unfunded, understaffed, and very low capacity to a pluralism where multiple different stakeholders were providing services to farmers and producers. And now then, yet there was very little coordination, very little understanding of who's doing what, etc. And all this required, at the same time, there was so much was evolving in rural farming communities and food systems. You know, extension was traditionally linked with the production technology transfer, etc. But then there was huge demand on market linkages, this and that, food processing. I just may request this person to turn off his video. Chin Hong, do you mind turning off your video? Thank you so much. It's a bit distracting me. So at the same time, you know, our demand was diversifying and expanding, as well as our role and services were diversifying. No, not only about production, we have to provide services about market, nutrition, and also addressing some business and social issues, in which required new sets of skills and capacities needed, and which all of this was like coming as a big new challenge and becoming an issue to provide services effectively and efficiently. At the same time, there was new problems, new opportunities was emerging, and you know, after decades of neglect, agriculture extension and rural advisory services are now a center of global conversations in regards to sustainable agriculture, resilient livelihoods, inclusive growth, and therefore in context of achieving SDGs, especially 1 and 2. No? So there is suddenly a lot of interest in people starting to realize the importance of extension advisory services. And what was missing there was evidence. We didn't have a lot of evidence, we still don't have a lot of evidence to show what extension can do and what can be the return on investment in extension. We have, the evidence we have is so far is very ad hoc. It comes in different forms, not systematic. 1988, there was this major study that was done by Swanson et al. And then there was the worldwide extension study that was done by GFRAS and FAO 2009 and 12. And then FAO's SOFA 2014 talked about people's access to, farmers' access to extension advisory services. In 2000, the Global Inflation Index brought out 2 indicators that's related to extension. So those were more or less a few data that existed, but then at the same time, there are a lot of reports attached, and assessment reports, innovation reports, project reports that are often, very often connected to, you know, patchwork of project activities. And they are turned to be quite qualitative and also lengthy. So we had some uncoordinated efforts to provide evidence in extension. And in all of these efforts, They often focus on public extension, investment in public extension, treated extension as a mechanism to disseminate technologies instead of advisory services that is providing diversity of advice and services to farmers. And they focus on production-oriented results, ignored social and environmental variables. They treated the advisory services as a group of individual providers rather than a system with a collective governance and interactions among themselves. They neglected the broader agricultural innovation, agri-ecosystem context, and most often they measured mostly just input and output. Input in terms of how many staff they have, how much money going into it, output in terms of how many trainings they have, organized, how many farmers attended, and what other training materials they produced, etc. So this were not enough to justify what extension could do. One, two, justify that we can produce enough return on the investment that can be made in extension. So against this background, what we really needed was new set of instruments to measure the performance and outcome of agricultural extension and advisory services. That can generate different sets of evidence and different types of evidence to communicate in different levels of for different purposes. No, some people need very qualitative, very thorough analysis and the understanding of extension services on the ground, and other people, especially when it goes to policymakers, they don't have a time to read our nice report and our story. So therefore, we need to come up with a succinct, very visual, or the evidence that can convince them in very few moments. Now, to meet this demand, starting 2018, we started working on this. First with the comprehensive assessment guide, which later Sophia will talk about, but then we come to a very collaborative and very consultative partnership and process together with the global and regional experts. Namely, as Rashid was saying, no, FAO partnered with the main GFRAS regional organizations, APIRAS, AFAAS and RELASER in Latin America, as well as FiBL in FiBL is a research institute based in Switzerland, and Christian from FiBL will speak also a little later, and CRISP. It's a Center for Research in Innovation. Rashid, why don't you come in?
Innovation and Science Policy.
Okay, thank you so much. So I was scared I would definitely make mistake. And CRISP, no, Rashid is a president of CRISP, and together with Nimisha, they played a very important part of it. Now, in addition to this, we also want to make this process as much consultative, as much ground-rooted as possible. And therefore, we engaged various experts at the regional and country level. And here that includes Sanchipet, Dario Oxladora, and Sasider, Margaret from Uganda, etc. So then what do we do? So we started with the conceptualization and stock taking in 2018, just to see what's out there. You know what's out there and what value we can add instead of duplicating or repackaging what's out there. Then in 2019, we held an expert consultation in Rome, in FAO, brought together around 30 experts in extension, innovation, metrics, evaluation, etc. backgrounds. Then 2020, we really worked on the content. And this was done in a very consultative way. We had various sessions with our regional experts, brainstorming, discussing every single indicators and questions we may include in our instruments. And once we had the content or the publications, let's say instruments prepared, we took them to a country level for testing in 2021. And testing was done in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Then 2022, end of 21, we finally finalized and published. And here in 2022, we are, bringing it to you for your future use. No, I just want to say very quickly on testing, country level testing. So as I said previously, it was tested in partnership with 3 regional networks of GFRAS. In Asia, APIRAS led the testing, and it was done in India under leadership of Nimisha and Rashid. In Africa, it was done in Uganda and Burkina Faso in the leadership of AFAAS Country Network, Margaret Mangini, and REDCAR, Burkina Faso and REDCAR Sub-Regional Network led by Patrice Germain. In Latin America, we tested 4 countries: Brazil, Costa Rica, Ecuador, and Peru. And in these countries, we had Maria Auxiliadora and Francisco took a leadership role in this process, but then we had many other national experts were contributing and hired to carry out the testing process. Then what are the outcomes of this? As we have it in front of us, we have 3 complementary tools or instruments. They are complementary, and I emphasize the complementarity of these tools because they are different in nature. For example, comprehensive assessment guide, very comprehensive and it's very qualitative, as well as some quantitative elements too. And yet, indicator framework, on the other hand, is very high level to indicators that is very quantitative. And the purpose of indicator framework, okay, without giving up all the presentations that's coming here is, give you a very high level helicopter view of extension services. And then you have the scoring tool, ESY tool, that gives you intermediate, a bit zoomed in view, which is still can be quantified into a score that can still give and satisfy those who wants to see the numbers, see the figures, and doesn't want to read long report. No, then we have in the next level really zoomed in, very comprehensive assessment guide, and when possible, these 2-3 tools should be used all together to complement each other and make it complete. One additional bonus we had in this process is that after testing, we analyzed the data, which Chris will share a little later. And as a result, we actually put together a scientific journal article, which was published also last year. So Rashid, this is what I wanted to say. Unless there is something heard from other members of the team, I will hand it back to you. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Degi, for giving an overview of the whole kind of a process, the rationale for developing these set of tools. And now we will be having 3 presentations. One on the indicator framework, followed by a comprehensive assessment guide and the scoring tool. And after that, we will be able to take questions. If you post some of your questions in the chat, we will try to prioritize and take it looking I think, depending on the time. So I will start with this whole indicator framework document, which is it's already out. I think before I go into the further details, I just wanted to say that, as Degi pointed out, lack of evidence has been a major issue. Lack of evidence on the properties, the performance, outcomes, and impact of extension advisory services. This has been a problem which has also really constrained, I think, advisory services from getting the due recognition from the policymakers or from those other stakeholders. So this has been a problem. And the indicator framework, in a sense, was developed as an overall structure for two things. One is for assessing the current status of advisory services and also to measure the performance and outcomes. So I think this is how we basically started developing it. Next slide, Aidan. But when we started developing this issue, the first challenge which we faced is in developing a framework logic, and second is about the theory of change, which I will come later. And this framework logic has three parts. I think one is the pluralism, which we have discussed earlier. Because we have several players in the advisory space, either as EAS users, men, women, youth, and a large number of users. And we also have a pluralism in the area of providers, public sector, private sector, NGOs, farmer organizations, and the boundaries are fluid, I would say, because some of the providers can also be users, and some of the users are also serve as the providers. And there is a large number of other actors in the enabling environment who try to regulate, who support, who finance advisory services, and advisory services also depend upon them for a large number of support and services, including research support. So I think so we have a pluralism, so we need to consider the pluralism in the EAS provision. Second is the whole issue of framework, the characteristics, because our purpose is to provide a wide view of the performance of the system that also includes the structural and functional characteristics of the system. We also wanted to look at the mechanisms for capacity development, client perspectives. Aidan, can you move to the next one, where we talk about the strategic orientation, client demands, mechanisms for coordination, learning, monitoring, and evaluation. So we need to have tools that should be, or instruments that should be able to capture these at these different levels, for instance, from inputs, activities, outputs, outcomes, and impact. So if you look at the pictures here, so what we are trying to do is we develop the indicators, and not merely the indicators, but also tools and mechanisms for collecting this data. You can see we are using the EAS assessment guide as an instrument. EAS scoring tool is another one. And there's always, they're looking for secondary data. And some of these tools are probably more important at different levels. For instance, the assessment guide is more important at the input, activities, and output level, whereas a scoring tool can provide a good analysis of the outcomes and also the performance in terms of the outputs and secondary data at all levels. So what we are looking for is so we need an indicator framework that captures all these so that we get an overall view of the system, the performance. Next one. So we first also have to develop a theory of change that is guiding the development of the indicator framework, because there is an assumption that access to advisory services and their effective use by farmers and other clients, other stakeholders, is very critical for addressing the challenges which we are facing currently, and that will help the farmers to mainly to enhance their income, maybe the employment, the productivity, and finally achieving the other development goals, including sustainability. So I think achieving resilience. So this was what the theory of change has been trying to do. So we need to track the performance. We need to have indicators that are appropriate to capture the information at all these levels. And you can see we have we wanted to start from the impact level, because that is the broad development objectives which the advisory services is contributing, maybe contribution to the sustainable development goals. Then we wanted to track the outcomes which are at 3 levels, maybe the long-term, intermediate, and immediate outcomes, because one is absorption of maybe learning about new technologies, second is its application, and third is in terms of, based on that application, what has really happened in terms of maybe enhanced empowerment or sustainability or enhanced resilience. So we need to capture that. Outputs are basically the indicators related to the extent of reach. Are these services reaching the right kind of people, and are these services affordable? Activities, advisory services not do a number of things. It's not merely merely sharing information or disseminating new knowledge. It is also about on-farm problem solving. Many of them are involved in strengthening farmer organizations, human resource development, facilitation. We talk about co-creation, so we need to have indicators that appropriate that, and also the inputs, which includes maybe from funding onwards to human resources, not mechanisms for knowledge management, logistics, infrastructure, monitoring, and evaluation. So I think this is what we wanted to do. And the next slide, where we wanted to now talk about the indicators. So what we did, we developed total 40 indicators, which we'll say as the out of which we selected the core 10 indicators, which we consider as the kind of a minimum set of indicators that are important to provide a snapshot on the performance of advisory services. And if you look at, these are from the 3 levels. If you look from the top in terms of outputs, activities, and inputs, but there is a rich 30 other complementary indicators. And if we can capture all the indicators, I think that is probably the best way to understand the performance of the system. Next one, but I think we also realize at the same time that data gaps exist at the country level. It is not that the data is available for all these in all the countries, but that doesn't mean that but then it also means, but there is a lot of data which is also available, because when we pilot tested these tools and instruments in the three continents, we could see that there are a lot of experience we gained in terms of the availability of data. And we could see that at the impact level, we should be able to capture, at least we will be able to understand in terms of what is the performance on the SDGs, and whether how the extension advisory services are contributing to that. Outcome level, I think when Christine made the presentation on the EC scoring tool, I think scoring tool is a good way to capture the outcomes from the efforts, outcomes resulting from the extension advisory services activities. Output level, many of the annual reports of the ministries, EAS organizations have a fairly good amount of data on the outputs and the activities which they have been doing. Internet statistics is available, and there's a lot of secondary data which we could use at to capture at the input level. So I think all these instruments can capture a share of what we are keen to do. I think to conclude, what I wanted to say is that maybe sometimes the data is not available, data gaps even exist, but I think this is the time that we start developing some kind of a systematic mechanism to include these indicators in the regular data collection, because we have been discussing about having observatories on extension kind of a performance over the something like similar, but maybe but also different to the ASTI, the Agricultural Science and Technology indicators. But I think we need to have it's high time that we need to have a mechanism that is that really works to systematically collect this information and make it available. I think I will stop my presentation here, and I would like to invite Sophia for her presentation on the comprehensive EAS assessment guide. And Sophia is working with the FAO, the Office of Innovation. She's an extension advisory service specialist, and she also participated in development of this operational guide for the comprehensive EAS assessment guide. Over to you, Sophia. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. First of all, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me. As Rashid mentioned, I will be presenting an operational guide on comprehensive assessment of national extension and advisory service systems. Next slide, please. Yes, so what's unique about this guide? First of all, it provides practical operational guidelines and not only a conceptual framework. It takes a perspective of agricultural innovation system, and it looks not only as a public provider of extension, but on all possible providers, including informal ones like farmer leaders, NGOs, development projects, internet, etc. It takes a system perspective, meaning that it doesn't only look at the single element, but also on how they work together. It also considers not only quantitative data such as yield or income of farmers, but also those intangible qualitative ones, like, for example, farmers' improved capacities. It gives a lot of space to the client's perspectives, and it takes functions as an entry point for stakeholder mapping, which I will explain better in a moment. So far, it has, can you go back for a second? Thanks. So far, it has been piloted in Azerbaijan, Ecuador, Kyrgyzstan, Liberia, Madagascar, Odisha in India, Tajikistan, Tunisia, Uganda, Ukraine, and Uzbekistan. Next, please. Okay, so this is methodology framework. We start with the preparation phase when we create a country team, we train them, and we set the goal for agriculture sector. Then we have implementation phase when we look into framing conditions, so country conditions, country context which influence extension. We look also at the client's perspective, and by clients we mean farmers, but also other actors in the agri-food system who depend on extension for advice and information. And then we have system analysis when we look at the system structure, functions, and enabling factors. Then we pass into consolidation phase when we analyze the findings, we validate them, and we plan for action, because the assessment should be the basis for some form of action planning, be it a policy formulation, a research, a reform of extension, or organizational change. Next, please. Let us now look a little bit in depth on some of the aspects which are important for the methodology. So first of all, it's very important to create country ownership. We do it by setting up national goals for agriculture sector against which we will be assessing the extension system. And this increased relevance of the findings. We created a country team, as I mentioned, the country team which is comprised of different stakeholders, so producer representatives, NGO sector, private sector, public sector, etc. It facilitates recognition of the results by the national stakeholders, but it also gives an opportunity to gain a better knowledge of their national EAS system. It also helps them to develop the capacities to conducting similar assessments in the future, and it helps them with networking. Next, please. Next slide, please. Okay, so another important feature of this methodology is client's perspective, which is considered throughout the entire process. So first of all, in the preparation phase, as I mentioned, they're included in the country team, but also whatever concerns they express that should be assessed, we consider them in the planning. So we are not imposing assessment, let's say, perspective, but we actually listen to the clients and users of extension to see what we should be assessing exactly. Also during the implementation phase, the clients are not only providing the data, but also we dig in depth into their perception of the extension services, relations that they have with them, their needs, etc. And we adapt the assessment process accordingly. During the consolidation phase, we consult them during the whole process, and we also validate the findings with them, and we communicate them in appropriate, culturally appropriate way. Next, please. So here we go into the system analysis, and let me talk first about the functions and the structure, because by analyzing functions and the structure, we keep in mind this national agricultural goals that we set at the beginning of the process. And when we identify functions which are needed, extension functions which are needed to achieve these agricultural goals. So function A, B, C, D, etc., etc. Then when we want to identify stakeholders, instead of asking who in the country is providing extension services, we ask who provides the function A, B, C, D, where the farmers turn to when they need a service A, B, C, D, etc. This way, we're able to identify a broader range of service providers, also those informal ones who may be not associated automatically with their extension and may have fallen through the crack of otherwise stakeholder mapping. Like this, and if you can press next, we can also identify, for example, the functions which are needed, but they are not provided by anyone, so the gaps in service provision. When we look at the stakeholders and providers of the extension services, we also look at the linkages and collaborations with them. And also here you can click twice on the next. So how well they are coordinated, how well they collaborate together, exchange knowledge, etc., which is very important for the good performance of the system. Next, please. And next. Okay. Another important thing, element of the system analysis are enabling factors. So the factors inside the extension system which are needed for its good performance, good functioning. So we look at the governance and coordination of the extension system. We look at its funding, both at the public side but also private side. We also look at the support that extension actors can get in terms of access to the data and research results, in terms of access to digital services, because we know that now digitalization of extension is a very important trend, and also at their education training, so how they can upgrade their skills in order to improve the services. So in the guide, you can find much more. It's a really quite comprehensive guide, and I think I'll stop here because I just wanted to highlight the main features. So thank you so much. And as Dagi and Rashid mentioned, this tool is very much complementary to the other two tools presented today. And you can see the link to the PDF here. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thanks, Sophia. I think we are now going in the series in the order, and without any delay, I would like to invite Christine Goverman from the Research Institute for Organic Agriculture in Switzerland. I just to talk about the scoring tool. And Christian has previously also worked with FAO. He's also been developed the monitoring tools for agricultural innovation systems. And over to you, Christian.
All right. Thank you very much, Rashid, and hello, everyone. It's my pleasure to introduce today the Extension and Advisory Service Systems Yardstick, or EASY in short. And it really is a pretty straightforward tool that we have kind of developed in order to plug some of the holes that Dagi has pointed out that exist in the evidence landscape on extension systems. Next slide, please. Oops, yeah, there we go. So we really have kind of few quantitative indicators. There's quite some qualitative evidence out there, which sometimes can be difficult to quickly process and make available to decision makers. So somehow this gap in the middle we try to bridge by developing an innovative evaluation method that can inform, that can support informed decision making, and that can really help to identify opportunities for capacity development for investment in EAS, and that can also stimulate learning. It's a semi-quantitative approach based on ratings. And we try to really cover kind of a wide range of performance and outcome criteria with it. Next slide, please. It's split into two modules. We have module A for the performance of the system or its functionality. And here we're proposing expert-based ratings so that in each country a number of experts would be selected based on their knowledge about EAS. And then there's a virtual data collection instrument that's been developed based on COBO, with which through a sort of participatory assessment you can collect this data, but it can also be, as was done during the pandemic, it can also be done online, the data collection. Then module B, this is more to look into some of the outcomes of extension, what happens, right away, then and then further down the impact pathway. And here, the idea is to purposefully select some users, some clients of EAS, covering a diverse range of geographical regions and also different value chains, and really then digging a little bit deeper of what are perceived outcomes. And again, this is also implemented in our COBO instrument. Next slide, please. Now here you can get an idea that in each module we have different topics, three topics in each. In module A, it is about the enabling environment that includes funding and monitoring, infrastructure, these kind of sort of enabling factors. Then looking into scope and provision, quality of services, inclusiveness, these are important metrics here. And then coordination, collaboration, and learning is the last topic under EAS performance. Then in the second module, the outcomes, that's really going from acquisition of skills, be it technical or social skills, to more than behavioral changes, and then down the road to, we had to be quite selective here, but we select economic resilience, social well-being, and environmental integrity as the long-term outcomes here. And we obviously, there are many more things, but we need to make sure that we kind of pick those that we considered particularly relevant, or that give us a good snapshot of the overall pathway of change. And saying this, it's really not that these two modules will give any indication of a causal link between a certain EAS intervention and these outcomes. It's more going to be a reflection of getting a comprehensive picture of what does the system look like, and what does it deliver in the end, and then drawing more some sort of drawing out some ideas on the correlations, or on the contribution from one to the other. And yeah, the next slide, please. Here a little bit about how the tool works operationally. We have, for each metric, we have several questions, and these questions are then rated or scored on a scale that ranges from 0 to 3. And then the scores for each question are then aggregated. And for each question, we also have more detailed explanations. And ideally, it is done as part of a facilitated assessment, where we have a facilitator accompanying the scoring process and really explaining what's behind some of the questions, because they can also be abstract, or they might need to be contextualized in some cases. All right. Then. Next slide, please. Yeah, okay, I already mentioned that. This is more or less how we designed the process. The tool was also piloted not only in Latin America, but also in the other locations that were mentioned before, across Asia and Africa. And so we really try to prepare, map out the most important actors so that we can include them in the assessment, then have a facilitated self-assessment in smaller groups, data collection through the COBO tool, then the data is extracted from there, and then the analysis can be performed. Either you can do the analysis in any software that you like to do, but we also have pre-configured spreadsheets that allow to just import the data and then create provide some basic graphs that you can immediately use. And even you could then have some feedback just a few hours after the data collection with the first basic visual graphs that you're producing, and bring it into the discussion and validate the results also there. So it can be a quite interactive process actually as part of a 1-day or 2-day workshop. All right, next please. This is how one of these graphs might look like. So these are basically the metrics under our performance module A, and then you're clearly seeing, all right, in terms actually of the scope and provision, inclusiveness, but also the key functions there, we have relatively high ratings. But in terms of, for example, monitoring and evaluation, A 1.4, there seems to be a weakness. And I would never interpret the scores or here our performance scale from 0 to 100 as absolute values. It's more. It gives you an indication of the relative importance or relative kind of performance of these different metrics, and then entering that into a discussion and really saying, okay, do you also see, okay, here we have in the assessment now found that there are weaknesses there. We have seen strength. Is that also how you perceive it in reality? And then it can, across time, you can also then use it for monitoring and see how such kind of a visual representation of EAS performance develops and changes. I want to show you a different way of visualizing it in the next slide. This is for module B. You can also do these stacked bar graphs across the different metrics. Red is very poor scores, green is very high, or the high scores. And then you'll see, okay, for economic resilience, for example, in the first case, yeah, there seems to be an issue here. However, when it comes to technical knowledge, actually, it's less problematic. Again, just kind of a snapshot of where some of the strengths and weaknesses, or some of the outcomes in this case that are achieved to a higher degree or that are achieved to a lesser degree in the perception of the respondents that answered these questions. All right, next slide, and then I'm finished with that. Just some final reflections. It's relatively comprehensive. We try to really cover a lot of aspects of EAS performance and outcomes, but also keeping it simple, making it cost effective, that it's easy to integrate into a workshop, or or doing it as an online kind of event. It's quite good to analyze, what are hotspots at a system. It can definitely be applied at the national level, but you can also apply it at the provincial level or at the territorial level. It's quite flexible in that sense, also depending where your focus is. And then will allow you to identify some of the gaps where future investments and capacity development efforts can be targeted. It's very sort of compatible with the other two instruments that have been presented, and as such, I think it can make a valuable contribution of generating more evidence for EAS. Thank you very much, and with that, I'd like to hand back to Rashid.
Okay. Thanks, Christine, for this presentation. I think we are now almost reaching the end of the session 2. We haven't seen any specific, but I am seeing only one question. I think from Muhammad Ali asking, can you please explain more about the scale? Maybe I think this is a question to Christian. Christian, can you?
Is that could you maybe qualify? You mean the geographic scale at which this is applied, or what do you think that refers to?
Muhammad Ali, can we unmute Muhammad Ali and ask him to reiterate the question?
Yeah, thank you, Rashid. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's really fantastic work, and I would like to congratulate all of you, although it's start of the work. But I'm a bit interested about the scale, as you were explaining that it is from 1 to 3, right?
The scale is from 0 to 3, so like a 4-point scale.
4 point. So if we add all 4, so these, how these would become 100?
All right. No, I think we then, of course, it was then because we aggregated across the different scores, and then we just converted kind of our 4-point scale into kind of a goal achievement scale from 0 to 100. So let's say if you have a 3, but obviously you make an average, right? Across, we have many questions, so you make kind of an average, and that average could be 2.5 also, or 3.7, something like this. And then like 100 means that across the metric you only have each value is a 4, which is very unlikely to happen. And let's say 50% would be that on average the scores are 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
Thanks.
maybe I got it. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Christine. I think we are just.
And Rashid, what
yes.
does 0 mean? Is that mean undecided, or what that reflect? 0.
No, zero means that really there is no performance. So it means that all ratings were 0 in that metric from all respondents. So again, this is not so likely to happen. It would mean that really not at all, or very poor, not at all, kind of that all respondents for this metric quality of services would have given it a 0.
Okay. I think we are running a bit behind schedule, and I think some of these questions probably may also we may have some more questions maybe when we go to the next session. But I would like to close this session, and I would like to thank both Christine and Sophia for the presentation on these different tools. And I would like to hand over the floor to Johan to moderate the next. We are going to have a panel discussion, and Johan is agricultural economist with the FiBL. And he was also part on developing this the scoring tool. Over to you.
Thanks a lot, Rashid, and welcome to everyone. We now got an overview of the 3 tools. We got the basic idea of how they work, and we now will actually hear from the people who were involved in the implementation, in the designing, testing, and validation of the tools. And we are very lucky because we got people on board from several different continents. And I will quickly introduce our panelists, starting with Maria Auxiliadora Briones. Maybe we can also make a quick mic check with the panelists. So maybe you can quickly unmute and say hello. Maria, hi.
Hi, Johan. Hi, everyone.
Welcome.
Thank you to be here. And I would want to share with you our experience. Thank you.
Perfect. So Maria, she has actually more than 25 years of experience in the on the topic of extension. She's a consultant, and she has been mainly involved in designing and testing the easy scoring tool in Ecuador and Costa Rica. I would then like to welcome also Urben Correa da Silva. Are you with us?
Yes. Hello.
Great.
Oh, it's great to be here with you.
Directly from Brazil.
It's an honor to be invited and involved in this study.
Yes, great. Urben, he's from Brazil. He's actually working for the Ministry of Agricultural Development, also working as an extensionist at the Paranaense Institute of Technical Assistance. and you're also the president of the Brazilian Academy of Rural Extension. Welcome. Then we move from South America or Central South America to Africa, and I would like to welcome Patrice Jamen.
Hi, Johan. Good afternoon to all.
Hi, Patrice.
Happy to here with you.
Welcome. So Patrice, he's
Thank
working
you.
at CIRAD in the innovation unit, and he has also like more than 20 years of experience in extension, especially extension related to the promotion of agroecology. Welcome, Patrice.
Thank you.
Then we're still in the African continent, and I would like to welcome Adeline Washna Muhibwa. I hope I pronounced it almost correctly.
Yes, hello, how are you, everyone? Yeah, my name is Adeline Muhibwa. You had tried Rashana. And I'm happy to be part of the panel and to hear and share with you all. Thanks.
Great, it's a pleasure to have you here. You also have a lot of experience in the field. You have been actually involved in the application of the 3 different tools, so you have a very good picture. And yeah, you're also like, of course, involved in AFAAS, and yeah, I think Aidan will then post more about you in the chat. And then our last panelist, we now move to India. Nimisha Mittal, also welcome. You're working together with Rashid at CRISP, the Center for Research and Innovation and Science Policy.
Hello,
welcome,
everyone.
Nimisha.
Greetings from India. Thank you.
So we have you all on board. Thank you very much for finding time to be here with us. And I would like to ask you the first, let's say, introductory question of this panel discussion. And so we have been developing 3 tools, but maybe the first question is, so you all come from different regions. Currently, what is being done in terms of evaluation of advisory and extension services in your countries or region? Is anything done? Is nothing done? What can be done better? So I think with this question, we can better understand the role these 3 instruments can play. So I would say maybe we can make a short round following the introductions. So starting with, or actually we go in the opposite direction. We start from you, Nimisha.
Thank you, Johan. Just to talk a little bit about, when we started to do this assessment, so one thing was very clear that, such kinds of assessment are not really happening currently. And especially no systematic approach are used to collect data on extension advisory services. The only thing which is collected, especially in a country like India, is data is collected on farmers' access to information. So it's like a national sample survey, which takes place in 5 to 10 years. And in that also, the effort is to understand which are the different organizations which farmers are approaching in order to access information. So, and there are really not much efforts which are made to look at the performance of EAS. And though that really goes on to even findings from the tool, but we also, so there are quite weak M&E system monitoring evaluation systems, which are only mapping maybe mostly outputs. So they are not really looking into outcomes, the number of farmers who attended trainings, the number of farmers who attended demonstrations. And so these are the kind of data which are generally collected. And so the state extension system was also quite, they found the tool very interesting because they thought it provided a kind of a more comprehensive framework for them to kind of help assess that. But maybe I'll talk about that later. Thank you so much, Johan.
Sure. Thanks, Nimisha. And Adeline, how is it in Uganda?
Yes, thank you very much, Johan. In Uganda, we have moved a leap in the National Agriculture Extension system or landscape. And I want to acknowledge we have a policy, we have a strategy, and also we have policy instruments that are operationalizing the policy and the strategy. That is the code of conduct, which the service providers are supposed to comply with. We also have the guidelines and standards that we are supposed that's supposed to guide the extension system. And also we have the process of accrediting who is actually a professional service provider in regards to extension. With all this level of effort, unfortunately, we don't seem to have any assessments being done. And recently, the National Agriculture Extension Strategy was actually under review because of its timelines. And now we have a new strategy, and they were only able to use the findings of the extension assessment guide, the ones that we were able to come up with as a reference document. And because there's usually no time, no funding, so having a systematic, comprehensive assessment is rather a challenge as far as Uganda is concerned. And but with this, I think I'll talk more about it, but with these tools available, it offers a low-hanging fruit whereby even you can do the assessments piecemeal, not necessarily going through the whole way out. And I also wanted to talk about the regional level, since I am part of the African Forum for Agriculture Advisory Services, that is the team leader for gender. And we are currently in the process of developing a position paper on the contribution of decentralized public extension to market-oriented and commercialized agriculture in Uganda. I just want to mention here that even as this process is ongoing and the paper is being developed, the assessment findings were such a reference point because data as national level is very scanty. So I am happy that we were part of this system and process, but also I am happy that we were able to have some of these assessments done and being able to get some data available. Thank you.
Thanks, Adeline. Patrice, you maybe have can tell us a little bit more about what's the situation in West Africa then?
Yeah, thank you, Johan. The situation in West Africa is very diverse. Since few years, they are increasing effort to revitalize extension. So there are a lot of assessment or policy review or strategy development that are ongoing. For the particular case of Burkina Faso, there was a strategy that was elaborated 7 years ago for 10 years. But since 2 years, they decided to review it again because the approach they use, some of the orientation are already outdated, so they need to review it. So I should say that at the Ministry of Agriculture in Burkina, there is an M&E system in place that are focused on processes, on activities, the number of experimentation plot or demonstration plot that are run by extension staff. So these data that are collected are mostly data for the public sector. There is no data at the national level covering all the extension providers. So this one gap that the tools will help is helping to fill. Secondly, we have many projects now in Burkina and also West Africa, which somehow involve fully or partly extension. And sometimes they want to spot extension, but they don't know exactly where to start from. So which data generated with the implementation from the implementation of the tool, project can easily decide or can easily have information or what are the key priority. Personally, I'm coordinating a regional project on agroecology and extension. And the fact that we use the scoring tool in Burkina before was very helpful because some of the data were already available, particularly the data on the environmental integrity. So there was no need for me, for my project to redo the work again. And lastly, I would say that there's a lot of requests from government, from development partners to really bring evidence on the table to justify the investments that extension people are requesting. I should say that these evidence are not only for development partners, but even for farmers, even for extension agents themselves, because they need to know if they are doing well or not, or what are the areas where they should improve. That's what I would like to say for now. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Patrice. I think it's very interesting to hear that you can perceive this demand for actually assessing the work which is done, to learn and to take measures. So I would like then to move to Brazil. Urben, maybe you can say a few words about the current situation in Brazil.
Right. Brazil has undergone extension in Brazil has undergone different cycles of the decades. We used to have a national system, well organized on the years 50s, 60s, and 70s. And at that time, we used to have evaluation monitoring tools, let's say, common for the whole system in the country. It used to be all public. Afterwards, this public system underwent a decay during the 80s and 90s, where the private sector emerged as a possibility for the country as extension service providers. And then during the years 2000 and 2015, a national system was kind of rebuilt, which has been dismantled the last 4 years. So we've been through cycles of extension, policy extension in the country with a great impact in the system. And nowadays, it's very, you would say, scattered around the policies and the initiatives. The role of the private sector has been significant in some regions. The public sector is still operating, but not as used to operate in the past. I would say we are in transition, not quite certain where this system is going to end in the next years. Although there is quite a significant capacity installed in the country in terms of extension services, considering public and private, non-profit and profit-oriented organizations. I think that it is more or less the situation we are facing here.
Thanks a lot. And Maria, maybe you can tell us which kind of work is done in terms of evaluation at the moment in some Latin and Central American countries.
Thank you, Johan. 8 years before, beginning with some evaluation in different countries of Latin America, included Central America. But these evaluations are for public system of EAS, and there are other regions are like said urban, many different actors, public and private actors. And if we did evaluation to public, we have a big system of private actors that are offer EAS services. And right now, these evaluation are actually, and every country have some actualization of this study. but in Latin America, in every country are a mixed system, and there are a big reform 20 years ago that all extension service were privatized, and now this process is at the reverse. Now the public policy wanted to make a public system for these farmers that needed that assistance of public system, but more or less it is the situation. And from the South and Central America and Costa Rica is the same thing. There is a public system at the Ministry of Agriculture. There are NGO, another organization from the civil society that offer this service to farmers. Thank you, Johan.
Thanks a lot, Maria. So I think we got a little bit of a picture of what's the situation in the different regions. So maybe there has been some initiatives evaluating the performance of the system, but these were mainly focused on the public sector. So not recognizing the pluralistic nature of the system. And yeah, so I think it's now time to better understand like how the tools we presented, let's say, can contribute to support the evaluation of the systems and help them to improve. So I would like to start talking or to hear from Urbain and Patrice. So you have been applying the easy scoring tool, respectively in Brazil and Burkina Faso. And I would like you to share like one highlight of the, one or two highlights of the application of this tool, also to better understand like what's the potential or the benefit of implementing such a tool. So I hand over to Urbain first and then to Patrice.
Okay, thank you, Joanne. Well, in our case, I think the opportunity to apply this tool that FAO is offering was quite important for us. It allowed us to kind of mobilize the private and public organizations of extension in the country, draw the attention upon the subject of evaluation, because this is something that we lack in the country as a whole. I've been operating the national policy of extension for almost 20 years. And one of the weaknesses that we had and still have is the lack of monitoring and evaluation of the services in the country. We managed to have a national policy for extension. Nevertheless, we failed to create a monitoring evaluation system for the extension services in the country. So what we have nowadays are, let's say, individual initiatives of some public organizations that are scattered around the states of Brazil, and project evaluation, NGOs, and not much discussion about the impact or the efficiency of the system, the services. And this has contributed for quite a decay in terms in the credibility, in terms also in relation to the credibility of extension in the country. So the opportunity to work with these tools that we are discussing today was a kind of opportunity that we had to reconsider the topic, bring it upon the table again, and we managed to actually involve quite a significant number of organizations on applying the tool. So in our case, I think was a great opportunity, despite the fact that it was not easy to introduce the topic and to explain why we're doing that. There is a lot of people very suspicious about evaluation. The public sector is very fearful of what you can obtain of the results because they can set back, can create problems for funding. Is a big issue. So we welcome the tools. I think it's very important. And in the case of Brazil, is a great opportunity. And there's still a lot to be done, but what we've done so far with the study gives us a chance to focus on something that can be relevant to extension in the country.
Thanks a lot, Ben. Patrice?
Yes, there are two things I would like to say. The first one is there is one major, should I say, outcomes that appear when using the tool. It is the dialogue among the different actors. In fact, the different actors are operating in the same in the same landscape, but without having the same vision, without having a specific vision regarding the challenges or the opportunities or even the performance of the system. So when we tested this tool in Burkina, it was an opportunity when discussing the results, when trying to understand. I found it very rich to have different point of view that had to understand different prospects or different perspective of the situation of extension. So dialogue is very important, and it's also very useful when you are doing the assessment. I'm anticipating a bit maybe on the question I'll look up later, but I would like to emphasize that. The second point is when using the tool, I'll put a focus on the diversity of functions of EAS. We try to assess how farmers are satisfied with the services provided by Extension Aid in terms of building their technical skills. We found that the extension is doing very well in terms of building technical skills, like using new technologies, climate smart practices, and all this. So extension is doing very well. But when we look at the other aspects like development of entrepreneurial skills or facilitation of innovation processes, the scores were rather very, very low, very poor, which is a bit concerning because a lot of partners are putting money, are investing on extension to support agripreneurship and also on extension to support agroecology. But we found that all these functions of extension that are supposed to facilitate the agripreneurship or to facilitate the adoption or the widespread or the scaling of agroecology, the extension people are not really, the extension system is not yet doing very well on that particular point. And the lesson I learned from that is that when we invest in our extension, we should first make sure that the extension has the capacity to really achieve what we would like him to achieve. So that is one key point. The other point that I also learned is about the complementarity between the different EAS systems. We have different types of providers, public providers, NGOs, farmer organizations. But when you look at, let's take the case of agroecology, you will find that public services are very good in capacity development on technical aspects. But when you look at the NGOs, farmer organizations, they are very good on knowledge co-creation, facilitation, so all these social aspects of agroecology, they are doing very well. So one of the of the lesson, I don't know if it's definite, but I think it's one lesson, is that maybe an extension organization cannot have all the capacity to meet all the demands in terms of agroecology support, in terms of agribusiness support. Rather, it is for the person in charge of coordinating the system to make sure that all the providers really work hand in hand in synergy to meet the diversity of the demands. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Patrice. I think that's actually a very interesting point, and I think that's also what the tool is aiming at, kind of capturing the performance of the system and not of an individual actor within the system, because then we might get maybe a misleading result. Good, thanks a lot. And actually would now move to, so we were now talking about the scoring tool. I would now like to hear from Nimisha, who has been implementing the assessment guides in Odisha, in Eastern India. Maybe you can tell us a little bit how this process went, which were the challenges. So we have seen with this scoring tool in Brazil, there was quite some reluctance from some, mainly from the public sector in undertaking an evaluation. How was it for you in India? How did the process go?
Thank you, Johan. So what you said, we tested the EAS in Odisha, which is one of the eastern states in India. And just to give a little bit background on the state, actually, because India is a vast country, and when we talk about one state, it is not really a representative of the country itself. So it has more than 60% of its population of the workforce which is engaged in agriculture. It's so agriculture is a major kind of a livelihood for most of the people, and a huge number of these are smallholder farmers. And there are also a big percentage, which I don't recall right now, which are also belonging to the indigenous or the tribal communities. Women are also involved in farming. And so there are different agro-climatic zones, but it has also huge tracts of land which are based on rain-fed farming. So, and it is also one of the states which is kind of, it has all kinds of climate stresses. So from hurricanes to areas submerging under the sea. So it has a huge coastline. And so, I mean, in the year when we tested the tool, there was unprecedented rainfall during this time of the year, which is the time for kind of, the standing harvest of paddy was there in the fields. So there are these kind of, multiple challenges which are being faced. And there's a extension system in the state. So it has a very vibrant public sector with different types of agencies which go to the village. So they have extension arms to the village level, and there is also a number of non-government organizations which are also working in the state, and also because it is one of the states which was quite poor after independence. So a lot of investment went into donor-funded projects and all that. And there is also a felt need within the system, within the public sector, for changing ourselves, for because I mean everybody keeps on talking about changing the mindsets of the farmers, whereas there's a felt need which was felt when we did the assessment to change kind of the extension to meet the new challenges, and also a felt need to change because the focus had been primarily on productivity enhancement of especially the public sector. So more kind of, more market orientation, and especially when we spoke to different actors, as Zofia and Rashid also spoke about that, this tool allowed us to delve deeper into different actors and what were the roles played by them, what are the functions which are engaged by all of them. And like what Patrice said was that some are more on technical aspects, how to do line-to-line sowing, but some are more on how do you link farmers to markets, or how do you mobilize farmers into groups. So there are different agencies, different organizations who are playing their roles very well, but they're not really coming together. So there was not really, so there is a need, and there is a need which is felt also to have a platform where they can all congregate together and learn from each other, do a bit of cross-learning. So one of the things which was very interesting was that when we started to talk to the Department of Agriculture or the state public sector about that, then they helped us on our recommendation. They made an advisory committee, which consisted of government as well as non-government actors. So there was an ownership from the beginning. And it also helped that we were also doing a few earlier, we did a capacity need assessment on the extension advisory services providers with them a couple of years ago. I mean, that whole process was still ongoing and we were doing a few things with that. And while then it also gave us an opportunity to talk to them, and they were very helpful in supporting this whole committee, which further helped us in identifying who are the other stakeholders, because the state is full of different types of stakeholders. So it was otherwise it is very difficult. So that is the whole beauty of forming a advisory committee like that. And it also kind of created an ownership, led to a policy dialogue. And it also led to kind of, later on a demand for creating an extension network within the state, which hasn't happened so far, but they also asked us for help for even making action plans. So especially the public sector, because the ownership of the public sector was much more in this whole process than the non-government organizations, because the public sector was mostly focused on extension, whereas NGOs have other kind of, it all depends on which projects they are involved in, what is their vision or mission. So these were the kind of, the good parts about it. The challenges were also, especially when we are talking about investments, not everybody is, they don't really want to kind of give that information. And also the other part is that they don't know how to give that information also, because what do they construe as investment into extension? Because many of the organizations, most of their money is going into salaries. So there was also this whole kind of and few of especially the private sector, they didn't want to share that kind of information. So that was the biggest challenge. And apart from that, we kind of really enjoyed doing this assessment over there. And also, I think that because of, like what I said, there was this whole ownership by this committee, which does kind of, go back to them again, follow it up with them, and then led to policy dialogue. So that's all what I wanted to talk about right now. Thank you.
Thanks to you. This sounds really like a success story somehow, really kicking off a process and getting some concrete outputs out of it. And I think it's also like really interesting to then get a picture of the system, like which actors are actually focusing on what and so on. And then you can really identify which gaps are there in the system. And I think it's also interesting to hear in your case that you got like support, let's say, from the public sector. Great. So since time is running, I think I would move to the last instrument, indicator framework, which is a little bit more the quantitative tool. And I would like to hear from maybe from Maria and then from Patrice. What's the main benefit of, let's say, spending resources on calculating these indicators? And have you been facing any challenges in collecting the data? Could you overcome them? Yes or not? Maybe you can tell us something about this. Please, Maria, I give you the word first.
Thank you, Johan, again. I think our experience was very excited because in this process, we look for something new topic, but we found it. We found a very interesting thing to support extension services. Our experience was that when we applied this instrument, before we look for service extension, and with this framework we look at all extension system, and I think that for the first way, it was interesting to all actors because it's more general, more biggest general, and at the same time is specific. And this collective tool facilitate us to compare one region with another in the same country, and to compare how it was the extension system into the one country to other country. And there is a very interesting because, for example, in the same country, we can see one situation in the south and another in the north. And with this tool, we found some luck that we have to take to improve these services. And on the other way, this instrument allows us evaluation of the extension system in different time. We can make some evaluation of the last year, and next year we can to make another and to see what happened in this period of time, and with some very hard data. And for us, I think was very interesting because statistics we can demonstrate how extension service can improve the life of farmers, family farmers.
Great. So not always easy to, let's say, find the data to compute the indicators at the extension system level. Good. And Patrice, did you have the same challenge?
Very similar challenges, or not repeat, but maybe add to others. The first one is who should do the selecting the right profile of those who do the assessment, because you need to have people who really know, who have a good understanding of the system, who are well knowledgeable, who are not biased, because most of the time people who are more close to public extension or to private sector or to even NGOs or farmers organizations. So this might create a bias. So this is one of the biggest challenges: identify people who can really do the assessment and in neutral way. So I will say, I will agree that it's not easy, but one of the solutions we found was to really have a critical mass of people who are doing the assessment from with diverse profile, so that even if there is a bias, having more people will help to minimize that. The other challenge we had was about the why, because when you are rating, people are not giving systematically why they are giving that rating. So initially the why was not in the question, but when we do the preliminary testing of the tool, we added the why, at least for some core questions, just to understand, to have an interpretation or an explanation from the panelists or for those who are doing the scoring, so that we can, when analyzing the data, we could better interpret and make sure that what we are saying is not very subjective. And this is where I see the complementarity between the different tools. The indicator framework or the scoring tool are very focused. They can help to have very accurate data, but not to have all the explanations. So if you link the scoring tool the educator framework with the assessment help to have a real bigger picture to really understand how the system is working and so on. So I'm seeing a good complementarity between the different. And lastly, the other point we had is that we had some people who were interested to use it not at national level, but at their own level, maybe a local level, as one of my predecessors was saying. And this is where the tool is interesting, because you can decide to use only some of the indicators depending on what you want to put the focus on. So people really appreciate that. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Patrice. You talked about complementarity, and I take the opportunity to ask Adeline, who had actually been involved in the, let's say, implementation of the free tools. What does she think? Do you also see complementarity between the free tools?
Thank you very much, Johanny. Yes, the three tools are actually very complementary. They complement one another. And when you look at the guide will pinpoint the underlying or hidden things that you wouldn't even know, because we were so amazed when we looked at the different functions that the AES would contribute, and looking at the capacities, you'd really feel that how are we going to implement all this with such limited capacities? So when you look at the indicators and they're asking for the level of performance, and you link it together with the functional capacities that are there, you can then know what strategic action or intervention or specific capacity that is required. So it was very important for us to go through the tools, but also look at the indicators and see if I am assessing a service provider, for example, do I have to go through, if I'm asking about the level of performance, and there are some technical but also functional capacities that are needed. So which one plays a lead role in ensuring that there is effective service delivery? And it was very interesting to see that most oftentimes we focus on the technical capacities and leave the functional capacities like leadership, problem solving, governance. And yet these also play a very critical role in ensuring that there's performance at the end of the day. So that the three tools actually work together. And even when we're doing the EAS guide, we were able even to come up with indicators, some of the indicators that are appearing in the final indicator sheet, meaning that, yes, it was already linking even without our knowledge. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Adeline. If we have time, Rashid, I would have like one last question for the panelists. Do we have the time for it?
I'm afraid we may not have. We are already a bit delayed.
All right, you decide. We could ask the panelists to give like a very, very short answer.
Okay.
Shall we try?
Yes, I can put the question in the chat, and then we'll request the panelists to give their response in the chat.
Okay, that's fine. Then I hand over to you, Patrice. Rashid, thanks a lot to all the panelists for contributing to the discussion. And I think please post the questions in the chat. The panelists are happy to respond. Okay. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Thanks, Aidan. Actually, this is a very good experience sharing where we listened to the use of these instruments in the real life context and the experiences from use of the tools. Now we need to move to the final session in this event. So this is a panel discussion, and we have 3 speakers. And this focuses on using data and evidence for improving EAS. So we have 3 speakers in this session. John Pricing from the UN FAO. He's the Deputy Director of the FAO Investment Center. We have Guy Four from the European Commission. Guy works on the area of research for innovation and development in European Commission, and previously with the CIRAD. And we have Patience from Uganda. He is the assistant, a commission for agricultural extension, who works in the Ministry of Agriculture, Animal Industry, and Fisheries in the Republic of Uganda. All these people have more than 2 decades of experience in the area of extension policy, planning, investment, research. So I would like to focus now on probably, considering the time, I just wanted to focus on one specific question. If I have time, then I would like to focus on another question. The specific question I wanted to ask is, how you consider the use of these tools and instruments, and how it can be used for the different purpose. Maybe I will start with John. In terms of how do you see these tools helping in terms of shaping the investments in extension advisory services? How is it? Over to you, John.
Thanks, Rashid, and good afternoon and good morning to everyone. Thanks for this invitation to speak with you all. I see many of my old friends from my work together with them on extension systems, which I have worked on quite extensively, as Rashid was kind enough to say. But now I'm in a different position where we're looking at investment design. By that we mean scaling up all these good practices and all these possibilities so they could be at the national level or perhaps at the subnational level or more broadly used. So that requires typically large-scale investments. And our investment center supports countries and the international financial institutions, the World Bank, the Inter-American Development Bank, EFAD, et cetera. We help them with these grand designs, working together with the countries. So when I think about my current role and the utility of the 3 guides, I think it's quite useful because I've been involved now with maybe, I don't know, maybe a dozen or so large-scale designs at country level. And in some respects, we were, starting, I wouldn't say from zero, but each one was its own process. And that's good because then it's locally custom tailored. But on the other hand, we don't maybe have the same metrics or usefulness that we could have by using the tools. So I participated in the review of the 3, and I found them to be very useful, especially with my new hat on. And maybe I just want to say 2 more points. One of them is that on many metrics, you could say that there's a challenge for us all, whether it's on the productivity yield gap that we can see between the possibility and what's typically happening, or the extension coverage, which in most countries can be as low as 7%, as high as 20, 25. And then also the amount of resources right now from the OECD countries that are being dedicated through, say, the multilateral development banks or the bilateral cooperation that goes towards extension, advisory service, farmer training, is only about 2.5% of the overall pot of money being spent on agricultural development investment projects. So we could feel disheartened when we hear that. However, to me, I have 2 things I want to come back to say. And one of them is that oftentimes our work is hidden or it's more nuanced within other components of projects. So in fact, quite a bit of resources and activity is taking place around the work that we do. However, it's taken place under a fisheries improvement project or innovation funds or other names where extension is key to deliver. One Health is one of them that has most recently come up. So I don't want us to lose heart. And then secondly, the investors, they need data, they need information analytics. And so I do believe these tools can be quite useful to us in order to tell the story and tell it with more accuracy. So Rashid, that'd be my first intervention. Hope I didn't go too long. No, I think you're on spot. Okay. I think the same question to Guy, because I think EU is an important donor investing in the space of innovation. And how do you look at the utility of these tools and instruments? Over to you, Guy. You are muted, Guy.
Yes, sorry. So maybe two different points. The first one, at the EU level, we support research and innovation project, and especially with DESIRA initiative, but also with other tools. And regarding this research and innovation, we have agricultural innovation system perspective, which means we promote, we support multi-stakeholder approaches to make sure that the different actors work together and co-create knowledge and are able to really generate and support innovation. So, and in this case, advisory services is part of the multi-stakeholder approach, and there is a need to improve these advisory services to be sure first they are able to work with other actors and the services are aligned with the demand of other actors. That's the reason why we have some projects really dedicated to strengthen advisory services. For example, with the DESRA initiative, in Madagascar, we have a project to analyze the advisory services system and fully align with your qualitative analysis regarding advisory services. And the objective is to provide recommendations, knowledge, policy orientation to improve the advisory system. The second point is the tools you presented are really interesting, because we lack in this different project and beyond this DESRA project, there is a lack of tool to assess advisory services, but to go beyond this transfer of knowledge and transfer of technology approach, and to go beyond analyzing activities and let's say direct output, such implementation of new technology. So I think I found your different tools very interesting, but just to mention the one on how to analyze an advisory services with a system perspective at territorial level, and you start from the demand. You start from the demand of the farmers, and you ask them which type of services they receive and which type of functions they need to support the farm. So it's quite interesting to have this. And you have concrete operational tools to score advisory services at organizational level, at that system level. So I think it's quite useful. However, we are looking for specific tools for promoting advisory services, able to promote, to support food system transition with agroecological principles. Patrice mentioned that, and I think there are some specificity regarding the requirements for advisory services to be able to support agroecological services. That's the reason why we want to work and with GFRAS and the regional advisory services networks to work on this topic, how we can strengthen advisory services to really to be able to support a food system transition based on agroecological transition. And I just want to mention that, as Patrice said, in the field, you and other participants mentioned that in the field you have different service providers, so it's a pluralistic system. However, they don't share the same vision, they don't share the same objective. For example, it's quite clear when you have advisory services dedicated to promote organic agriculture, you are not on the same page and advisory services dedicated to promote new technology, improve seeds and fertilizers. So how do you deal with that? And how do you also assess these tensions at territorial level to be able to improve the whole system, but taking into account this different point of view? And I think there is a need to work on this dimension.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. So the next patients, because you deal at the country level with the national policy and program development. So how do you see this these tools helping you in that particular area? Patients?
Yes, thank you very much. Sorry, I confused time. So I had been invited by two different programs. So I thought it was one. Then I thought I had missed, only to receive a call that I'm still on.
Okay.
I'm in the field, so you'll excuse me.
That's
But
fine.
yes, the issue of these tools in the context of in the country context, and probably in the context of the developing world, you know, we have been having a challenge of generating information and data that articulates the performance of the extension service. And because of that, we have not been concretely generate makers of the need to, and the African countries, the extension services have been grossly neglected with very low funding levels. So when we looked at this tool at country level, we had developed what we call demand used to generate information from the communities, understand the community needs, and look at the kind of services that are needed, and then we do channel these kind of needs to different institutions. But when we are reviewed these tools, we found it was more useful in terms of generating concrete information, because since we adopted the pluralistic extension system in 2015, as a Ministry of Agriculture, we have been having also challenges in terms of understanding and coordinating the non-state actors, understanding their capacities, in their ability to deliver services. And we found this tool is able to look at the organizational capacity of the different institutions, so that you can be able to program them and the capacities they need. And as a state, we could be able to plan to see how you can help build the capacities of these different non-state actors. So the tool is very useful. And when it comes to even in terms of generating indicators, it gives very good guidelines in terms of generating the indicators that we can use to measure performance.
Okay.
Yes. So, so in terms of in overall, really, we hope that if we get this tool domesticated, because we have to domesticate them to our local context. The only challenge we saw as the tools are very heavy, that sometimes it is difficult to address virtually everything in that tool. Some people are very, in terms of response, they don't have sufficient time to listen to everything in that tool. But what we only need is that we customize it and collect information that is relevant to particular parameters, and therefore we generate information that can help in terms of informing decision making. So in general, really, they are going to, the tools are good in terms of facilitating decision making and probably help in making more better policy decisions. Thank you.
Okay. So I think what we heard is that because these tools are helpful when it comes to maybe promoting, maybe in generating evidence for advocacy for maybe more investments, and also to measure the kind of maybe the capacity gaps, performance, appreciate the diversity of demands from the clients, and also the diversity of the providers in the sector. And so that means there is a lot of opportunities for using these in the different contexts for different types of purposes. I'm looking at the clock. I think we have maybe another 5-6 minutes. But I just wanted to ask maybe one round of a question to each of you. One is, okay, we know that these are very maybe useful, but I'm just wanted to know maybe how can we further mainstream these kind of tools and instruments in your kind of organizations, projects. How can we do it? Maybe 1 minute answer. John, we'll start with John. In the same order we'll go. Guy and then to Patience.
Thanks, Rashid.
Yes.
It was quite useful hearing the other panelists too. So in the 1 minute, I would say that to mainstream it, we need to have it be very practical and very usable. And also keep in mind the timeframes in which maybe investment projects are designed. Oftentimes there's 3 weeks. It could be 6 months, but there's consultancies for 3 weeks, for 4 weeks. So you have to make sure that it's doable in timeframes. And I really do like the practicality of the guides. That is, there's already a report outline available. There's types of consultants to be considered, but maybe we could even go further and have sort of standardized terms of reference so people could quickly come to them and use them. So that's just a practical way to advance it. And my last point, and my second point, is that there's also this micro and macro. You can have a macro system change in a country, which is great, and it could be quite an undertaking, but also there could be cases where it's much more micro or regional or maybe thematic, such as Guy was saying, that there's an emphasis on agroecology that could be quite different than a One Health emphasis on livestock. So I think we also have to be able to use this in flexible ways with different moments and opportunities and entry points. Thanks again.
Okay, thank you. Guy, how do you think how we can use it mainstream?
To mainstream, I think maybe the best option is to work with a EU delegation in the country, which are managing projects. When they have some projects, programs dealing with advisory services, they can be quite interested in using and having support to use such tools. So I think maybe a communication to the EU delegation could be is needed. The second way, as I mentioned, we work with, we want to work, and we are going to support GFRAS for strengthen advisory services to support agroecological transitions, and maybe based on some adaptation, or I don't know, but some work to be done, we maybe can use such tools to really assess the capacity of the service provider to address such an issue. So I think there is one option here.
Okay, thank you. To Patience, how do you see we can promote this? Anyway, UFAS has been trying to do it, but what are the other ways of mainstreaming these kind of tools at the country level?
Yeah, in terms of the national systems, there are already some existing tools that that are used, for example, by Uganda Bureau of Statistics to collect some when they are collecting on the national household surveys. There are also tools used by the Ministry of Agriculture. What I would from the government perspective, some of these tools can be can be worked out and integrated in the existing government framework of collecting information. In the M&E tools we have, which we use, so we can customize and get these tools integrated within the systems, and then you would continuously be able to generate information using the tool. The tool. The other, of course, but it also requires a lot of capacity building.
Okay.
From our assessment, it requires a lot of capacity building, and awareness, and getting the people to appreciate them. Because getting people to appreciate and understand that these tools and see the kind of value they bring to the system.
Okay.
For the non-state actors, I think it is much easier than the government system. Yes, because most of these non-state actors, from my assessment, they do not have tools to use in evaluating their programs. So this tool will come in as a very good hand in terms of helping them strengthen their institutions.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. I think we are probably at the, we are almost, I think the time is already ended. But first of all, I would like to thank both our speakers who shared experiences from the investment, from the research, and from the policy and practice side. So thank you, John, Guy, and Patience for joining us in this event. There are several comments which I do not have the time to, maybe I think some of them are all trying to appreciate, and some of them have raised some of the challenges to which we have tried to respond. I think it's a time to close the session. I do not want to make any kind of a very closing remarks, but I think two points maybe I would like to say. One is this was an exercise that has gone in the, I think we spent almost 2-3 years developing this whole tool. It was a lot of, I would say, group work. It was a partnership between the different networks, country for us, regional networks, country for our GFRAS networks, country for the FiBL and the FAO. And I would like to thank all of them for taking us to this day where we are able to promote this as part of the FAO side event. So I also thank the FAO for giving us this opportunity to organize this side event as part of this FAO Science and Innovation Forum. And maybe what we have seen is that many of these tools, instruments are very useful, and probably it also takes a kind of a contemporary view of what is extension, what is happening in extension globally currently. So I think so we need to look beyond the old set of indicators that was only looking at the investments and human resources now, and then probably some elaborate studies on the rates of return. But I think the policymakers are currently looking for not evidence of impact, but I think probably they are very keen to improve the performance of the system. And I believe this is where exactly these kind of tools are going to contribute very strongly. And I would like to thank all the panelists, all the presenters, and all the key speakers, and all the participants for joining this session. And thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you a lot. Thanks to everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye to everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you
Bye.
and bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much.